So today I'm going to show you how I make these small square bowls. I really like making these. They're fun, they're quick. Most people seem to like them. They get them when I give them as presents, etc. They are always well received. They're fairly easy to make once you have a setup for them. They only require a small amount of tooling, but there's nothing that most people who turn bowls won't have. And once you're set up for them, they're fairly easy to do, and you can use small pieces of wood. You can use just regular old plain dry, kiln dried hardwood that you have, leftover scraps from building something else or whatever. So if you do happen to mess one up, it's not a big deal. It's not a big expensive piece of wood. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little insert, and this insert is really important because the bottom here, this is the base of the bowl. This one's a little bit on the small side, but it's not bad. But what I do is I turn the bottom of the bowl first, and then I turn it over, and of course I have to now grip that little tenon that I've made there, that foot. And to grip the foot, if I grip it with any kind of a metal jaw, of course it's going to damage it, and it's going to look not very nice, and you're going to have to fix it. So what I do is I make these inserts. I've got a variety of them here. As you'll see, I have a bunch of different sizes that I make, and they have a cutout here. So this goes in the chuck, and as the chuck squeezes in, this becomes smaller in diameter and squeezes in on the foot. So I'm going to show you how to make one of these. I start off with this is the inexpensive cutting board stuff. I believe it's about 1/2 inch thick, and this happens to be, I believe it's 55 millimeters in diameter. I happen to have a hole saw. No, it's 50 millimeters in diameter. I have a hole saw that's that size. So I cut these on the drill press. I take a piece of plastic and I cut 5 or 6 of them at one time, so I've always got a few extra blanks sitting around. And then what you do with this is you put it in the chuck and you tighten it up with the chuck key, as soon as I can find the darn thing. It's supposed to go back in its holder, but sometimes it seems to want to go somewhere else. Okay, so that's in there. Now, the other thing is, with any of these, you can make 2 different sizes on one insert. You make that size and that size. And this size I think is a bit small for that one, but I've got another one here this one here I think is about perfect size for that. When that squeezes in, it grabs that. So you can make 2 sizes on each one, so you have half a dozen, you'll have 12 different sizes depending on the size of foot that you want. Okay, so what I do is I put this in here, and the first thing you got to do is you got to drill this hole in the center out, because this needs to be a ring, and so that needs to be able to compress like that when you cut this little wedge out. If it's solid right to the center, it's not going to compress very well. It just compresses so much better if that hole is cut out. Now of course, if I take my Forstner bit mounted in my drill chuck and I just try to drill that out from here, of course I'm going to hit the other side and wreck my Forstner bit. So you got to be careful of that kind of a thing. So what I do is just cut about halfway through. The lathe is going a bit faster. I want a bit slower than, I don't know, around 500-600 RPM. We should be fine. This stuff machines and cuts really well, but you don't want to get it going too fast because it will heat up and kind of melt on you a bit. So that's around 600 RPM. That's about as far as I want to go. So I'm going to come out, take the piece, flip it over, okay, now I've cut through. I think I have. So, with that cut through, I'm going to just pop this out so I can pop that little piece of plastic out of there. With that cut through, now I'm ready to turn a recess on there. So, the bowl that I'm going to turn here, I'm going to use a piece of walnut stock that I have already set up. It's really important that the piece of wood that you're working with is square. has to be square. And you have to also take very good care to make this recess right in the center. If it's off a bit, then these two corners will not spin in the same circle. These four corners, they have to spin in the same circle or it's a bit difficult. So it's really important to make the hole of this recess here. I think this is a 31mm Forstner bit that I did this with. Whatever size fits your spigot chuck, and the jaws on your spigot jaws on your chuck, and it's about 1/2 inch deep. You can go less than that if you have a thinner piece of wood, but I like it's about 1/2 inch because it's just gets a good bite on there to be able to cut this. Cut this with, you know, sending it across the room. Okay, so I'm going to make the foot for my bowl. You look at this one here. This is slightly larger than that piece of wood, and this is about 30. So I'm going to go a bit smaller than that. I'm going to go maybe 25, 26 millimeters. Just the foot will be just a bit smaller. You'll figure it out. If you make the foot too small, like this one I showed earlier, the foot's a bit small on this. For this size bowl, the foot should have been a bit bigger. That's a bad example I keep around to show people what not to do. And these two are about the same size, but I think you can sort of see that the foot's too small on this one. The problem is, when it sits on something, anything you put that's not exactly in the center, it tips over. So the foot's a bit too small on that. So 25, 26 millimeters would be about right. So I'm going to set my vernier caliper to 25 millimeters or thereabouts. I'm going to bring my tool rest over here and line it up about the center, and then I'm going to use this. I'm sure most guys who do the wood turning will know this. You take the vernier caliper and you lay it here on the tool rest, and you want to touch just this side. You don't want to touch that side. If you touch this side, the material touches the tool and pushes the tool against the rest, and it's safe. If you touch this side, the material touches the tool, lifts it up, and throw this into your face. So you touch this side, and then you watch on the other side where the line comes, and you move either in or out to get your line about where it's supposed to be. So then you can see you have a reference line. So I'm going to do that right now. I said, what did I say, 26? Okay, so it's 26 right there. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to touch this side only. See, that's too far in. If I look there, that's about, that'll do right there. So now I have a reference line for where I want to make my cut. So then I go and I grab my parting tool. This is a straight ground parting tool. And I'm going to just make a recess in there. Speed the lathe up a bit. Maybe around 1200 RPM would be good. Okay, and just, you know, this is very simple. This stuff machines pretty well. It's a bit soft. You got to kind of be careful, but I'm going to go about 4 or 5 millimeters deep here. That should be all I need to hang on to the bottom of the bowl. And then, important part, this area right here next to the hole, see out here it's kind of bouncing around? I don't really care about it there. Right here, it will actually touch the bottom of the bowl. It's about 4 or 5 millimeters deep, I guess. You want to make sure there's no extra junk in the middle here that's hanging out. The important part is the shoulder here that's touching the shoulder right here that will be gripping. This part in here is not really so important. The important two places are the shoulder here and then this little flat area here right beside it, because that flat area there, when the insert is around when the insert is around, it will actually touch on the bowl. I think you can see that there. So right in this area here, it has to be flat. And so then that grips like that. So you just do a little more work on that because it's not quite flat. Tell when it's flat because the tool stops jumping around. And then I'm going to get out my other parting tool, which has a dovetail grind on it. which means that the tip of the tool has a 5-degree grind on it, because I want to make this just slightly dovetailed in there, because the edge of the foot, I like to put a little bit of a dovetail on it, because it just looks nicer. If it's straight, it doesn't look as nice. If it's got a little bit of dovetail, it looks a little bit of flare on it, looks a little nicer, I think. Your mileage may vary. So again, I'm going to just clean that edge up right there. So that's the turning of the insert mostly done. Actually, I'm going to go just a little bit deeper. That's not quite as deep as I would like it. That's better. So it's important that nothing from the bottom here kind of sticks out and gets in the way. And then I'm going to again touch it with my dovetail ground parting tool just to make sure I got a bit of a dovetail going there, and just clean that edge up again. So you can tell that's not flat because it's bouncing. Here, not bouncing, it's flat. Take that corner off. That should work pretty good. Okay, so now I got to take this out. I'm going to go over to the workbench, and I'm going to put this in my woodworking vise, and I'm going to cut, basically I'm going to cut a pie-shaped V out of it. Doesn't really matter where you do it, kind of like that, because then that will allow it to compress on the foot. Okay, so just hang on a second and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've made that cut, took this piece out. Now you'll notice you'll get some little hairy hangers on here, so just take a razor knife and just trim them off, just so nothing interferes with how it holds your bowl nice and the foot of your bowl nice and steady. Okay, so that's the insert, and from there now I got to move to turning the bottom of the bowl to make the foot that'll fit into here. So I got to change my chucks around, so just hang on a minute and we'll do that. Find it's really handy to have more than one chuck. Of course, when you're first starting out, you'll probably only buy one. I find it's I have a Nova DVR 3000, and I have a Nova G3, a Nova Supernova 2, and a Nova Titan chuck. And the nice thing about keeping with the same family of chucks is that all the jaws from all the chucks work together. So that's a very nice thing to have. Okay, so I've got my spigot jaws onto the Supernova 2 here, and obviously this recess will go on there. Now, an important thing to mention, this has to be really, really square, because all of these four corners have to turn in the same plane. If this is a little bit cockeyed one way or the other, you're gonna not like what happens. It doesn't work out right. So how do you get it completely square? Well, if you have the bottom of your hole is nice and flat, and if this is nice and flat, you can just push it on there and tighten it up and it should work. But I've found that leaving that to chance is kind of a mistake. So I have a one-way live center, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have a one-way live center or something like it. And this has this cone that you can put on. So I put the cone on with the big side out onto the one-way live center. And I put that into my tailstock, and then I put this up there. It's not really on there tight. Let me see, I'll just tighten it up a bit. That's tight. I want it just a bit loose so there's a bit of play in there. And then I bring the tailstock up, and it pushes against that, and just apply a little bit of pressure. Not much, doesn't take much. Now that's going to be flat and it's going to be spinning. You can see, I can see here, hopefully you can see from the top, that it's spinning nice and true. So then I tighten it up, expanding the spigot jaws on my chuck into the recess. Make sure it's good and tight. Then I can remove this and get on with turning the base. Now, as I said before, the base that I'm going to turn is going to be around 25-26 millimeters. That's the foot of the bowl. So again, we do the same trick again. Line this up around center. And spin it to see where your center is. You want it close to center. This is still set from the size of the recess, so I'm going to leave that about where it is. And again, I'll turn the lathe on, and I'll touch this inboard side. Now I've got a reference on there. That's how big I want the foot. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the foot. Spinning at about 1200, I'm going to go a little faster. You're turning these bowls that have lots of air in them. As you can see, there's lots of air in there. Two things are very important. One is you want to turn a little faster than maybe you normally would. Small piece of wood, so the dangers are minimized. The other thing is, nothing but the tool ever goes over that there. You don't ever get your fingers over there. Nothing but the tool goes over the edge of the tool rest, because there's a little, this isn't so bad, but when you get the bigger bowls, that little airspace there is quite big, and let me tell you, that'll take a chunk out of your finger. So, got to lower this down a bit. Good angle there. And I'm going to just, first off, I'm going straight in. I want to go down around, I don't know, that's about 4 millimeters deep, I guess. I'll clean that up in a minute. One thing that I also like to do is, right here in the very beginning, I like to put a little, just a little dimple in the center. That'll get turned away later, but I put just a little dimple in the center so I do know where the center is. Just on the off chance that this thing goes for a ride, I will be able to put the tailstock back in and re-chuck it in the center if I needed to. So I'm about deep enough there. I'm going to go just a little bit deeper. So that's deep enough for the foot. The foot is still square right now. I haven't put a dovetail on it yet. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my 3/8 inch bowl gouge. This is ground with a, not a very long grind, but regular grind, I guess. A regular bowl gouge grind. Wow, say that fast 3 times. So, I'm going to be working from the inside, from the outside in. And like I said before, speed is important, because there's a certain time here where the tool is cutting air, cutting wood, cutting air, cutting wood. And if it's going faster, it's just a bit easier. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just get this down to where that is, and then I'm going to kind of show you how the curve of the bowl, you set it at this point. So steady pressure on the tool, and steady pressure on the tool rest. Lower the tool rest just a little bit. Again, the same old thing. You want to go 45, 45, and drop the handle a bit. You want to come in, and it's really important to have a nice steady hand when you're doing this. Turn the tool over, use the face, use the long grind of the gouge, and you can just pull that out just to clean that up a bit. Let's take a look. You can see I got some tear out here on the edge. That's kind of normal. Got a little bit tear out here as well. That's kind of normal. Now, as you can see from the top video here, I have 2 cameras going on. I've got top video. I hope you can see pretty well. First time using the second camera. There's not much of a curve there right now. So I've got a pretty big piece here. So I can go, if I want to, I can make this have quite a deep curve. So I could go maybe about here. You can see the kind of curve I could do if I wanted to. I mean, I could go really radical like that, but I don't think I want to. I find the ones that are really radical, they just don't look right. It looks better if it's a bit flatter. So I'm going to go somewhere in this area here. Yeah, you turn the speed up a bit more. I'm going to be about 1500 RPM. Sounds fast, I know, but you're only working on a small piece of wood. I don't think there's an inherent danger in that. Of course, when you're turning, you want to try to stay out of the line of fire, and at the very least, you want to have safety glasses on. I don't have many of these go flying on me anymore, and also right now I'm trying to talk on this video, so I'm not wearing my face shield. But if you're at all concerned, of course, wear your face shield. Okay. Move my tool rest in a bit closer there. So again, I'm going to start out here and I'm going to try to set my curve a bit more on this. Move my tool rest again just a little bit to try to keep it as close to that piece of wood as possible, because I'd like to keep the support of the tool as much as I can. Something you got to be careful about here, where's my curve, you can see there, is you want to make this a nice curve, okay? Maybe it shows up better on that. You want to make this a nice curve. You don't want to make it kind of straight and then a flat. It's very important that this is a nice curve. I'm going to go just a little more curve on that. Again, I'm going to turn the gouge flat, and I'm going to put, touching only one wing of the gouge, I'm going to pull. And you can usually get a pretty nice finish out of that. Now, unfortunately here I touched the edge of that foot, so I'm going to have to make that a bit smaller. This is for demonstration purposes only, I guess, so. I'm not going to spend a lot of time sanding this. I figure most everybody out there knows how to sand. It's pretty simple to sand. And I'm going to just concentrate on the turning. I'm going to now cut the little dovetail there. As you can see, it's got a bit of a dovetail on it now. I cleaned up most of it. Well, there's still some damage there, but okay. We're going to let that slide this time, okay? So the next thing that I want to do, this is something that I think makes the whole bowl look better. If you look at this one, this is slightly cupped here. There's a bit of a recess there. It's a bit concave. And the reason I do that is if this is perfectly flat, that whole surface has to sit on whatever you're putting it on, a table or whatever. If you have a bit of a cup in there, then of course only this outer ring touches. And so it'll be more steady, it'll sit on almost any surface better. I'm sure most of you are familiar with doing that with your bowls as well. Doesn't take much. I'm really not liking that damaged edge there, but oh well. So as you can see here, there's a bit of a cup there now. So that cup is what I want so that the bowl will sit smoother on a floor or whatever, on a table or whatever, on a floor. Okay, so I got lots of meat left on this, so I'm going to just return that foot because you know what, it bugs me. And I'm going to just walnut's actually pretty soft for this, but it works good. Okay, so that's returned. So now I got to get some more depth there. So I'm going to head back out here, moving close, take about another . Looks about right. Again, I'm just using one wing of the gouge and doing a pull cut. You can see I got a little bit of tear out there, which isn't great, but I'm going to work on that a bit more. A really light touch here. Nice light touch. Light touch with confidence. See how that looks. Got rid of most of that tear up, and now I've got a little bump there, so I'm going to again do my pull trick here. Get rid of that bump. Now, I will show you this about sanding just because we're here. I want to just touch that up too, just a little bit. Take my parting tool with its dovetail grind on it. Just want to touch that corner in there. Just clean that corner up. Now I know I put a little bit of a ring there, so I can get rid of that too. But that's okay. Okay, a note about sanding. A lot of people like to power sand, either with a a drill or whatever. Don't worry about this little tear out. Normally I would go and take care of this little bit of tear out, but we're doing a demonstration here, so I'm not really worried about that. Normally lots of people would use this kind of a tool like this, and power sand and that, but on a surface this small, you really don't need something that big. So I take a piece of sandpaper. This is a pressure adhesive sensitive, what is it, PSA? Pressure sensitive adhesive sandpaper, and I take it and I fold it over. And this happens to be a piece of 240, it's just happened to be sitting here. If you want, you can turn your lathe down to a nice slow speed. It's a DVR, an older one, so it takes a while to slow down. So here I am about 500 RPM, and you can go in here and you can sand like this if you'd like. Of course, you should be able to see there's like a ghost line right there. That's where the edge is, right? You don't want to sand past that, of course, because then that's not a good idea. So if you want to, you can sand here like this, and you can do all this sanding. That works. Nothing wrong with that. But then you got to come out and sand these wings anyways. So the problem with circular sanding is you get circular sanding marks. So for me, what I like to do is I lock my headstock, and then I just sand like this. It doesn't take long. You can sand the whole thing. Go through your 2 or 3 grits of sandpaper, whatever you're using. One place I will power sand It's important to get these sanding marks out now, or these tool marks, or get your sanding done at this stage. I'm not going to spend all my time here sanding because I think everybody knows how to sand. The one place I will power sand is here, when I sand the edge of this foot, the side of the foot. But it doesn't take much. So like I say, you sand here, you get rid of all these marks, you sand with the grain, nice straight lines. This is a 240. My 120 has gone AWOL on me. There it is. I buy these at 3M. Imagine they're expensive here in Japan, but so is everything else. Cut off a piece. I fold it in half like that. It sticks to itself, which makes it double-sided and twice as strong. And then I always take a pen, because they're all gray. Unfortunately, they're not different colors, and I write 120 on it. Okay? So that way I know it's 120. I don't accidentally pick up the wrong thing. So again, I can power sand that part there, and then I hand sand here. I just find it's such a small surface, it doesn't take very long. And so you can hand sand any tool marks you have out. I mean, you shouldn't have any, but sometimes you get them. Yes, you do. You get out the 120 grit gouge. This walnut is fairly soft and it sands pretty easy. Anyway, so you sand it out, you go through your 3 grits, I generally sand to 240. I sand 120, 180, and 240. Sometimes I'll go 320 depending on the piece of wood. Some woods will, you know, the walnut I don't think is anything worth going past, excuse me, 240. So now that's done. Now, important critical point here. This is the insert that I just made. You want to make sure it fits. And you can see it's a bit loose, but as you squeeze it in, it holds good. So you want to make sure that your insert fits onto the foot. That's a very important part. Okay, so now I'm going to change the, I'm going to take the bowl off of here, and I'm going to take the, change my chucks out. I'm going to put my G3 chuck on. Put my insert in there. Get this kind of lined up. That's gripping that. It's a little bit loose yet. That's gripping it fairly tight. And I'm going to do the same trick with the live center, the tailstock, and the cone. Okay, right now it's not really that square. Put that on there, give it a little push, and then I'm going to loosen this just slightly, give it a little push, and then I'm going to tighten it up. Now, from here, especially if you're not quite confident with your skills, that's turning pretty good. Change my tool rest. Put a smaller tool rest on, just so it's not in the way so much. Is I take the cone off. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. That must have pinged on the microphone. Apologize for that. Take the cone off, and when I'm first turning this, I bring the tailstock up because the reality is that's not the greatest, most strongest tenon in the world on there, and this is a 2.5 inch long lever, and it's just so much better and safer to bring your tailstock up and put a little bit of pressure on that, and then it's not going to go anywhere on you. It's not going to go for a ride on you. So again, bring your tool rest up. Make sure it's not going to hit here, because it's pretty easy to put this in and say, oh, that's okay, and then bang. That's not a good idea. So got that in again. Now, how thick do you want to make this? Well, obviously, if you make this thick like that, it's not going to look very nice. It's going to look kind of crappy. If you make it really, really thin, it's probably going to break, and it's going to go flying across the room, and you're going to have to start over again. And I know, because I've done it more times than I like to admit. The most important thing is, once you start cutting out here on these wings, you cannot go back and cut them again. Because once you get past this wing here, I'll show you here with my pen, anywhere outside of that circle, once you get it thin, once it's down to about, I don't know, 4 millimeters thick, less than a 1/4 inch thick, it'll be so flexible. If you touch it with a gouge, all you're going to do is make a mess. So you cannot go back. Once you start cutting, you have to kind of keep going. You cannot go back. It's very, very important that you don't go back. So again, I've got a gouge here. This one, same thing, slightly shorter grind. There's no real reason for that. It's just that the other one was getting a bit dull, and I don't want to stop and sharpen right now. So I'm going to start out here in the wings, and I'm going to work into around where that circle is, and then I'm going to go a bit deeper, a bit deeper, a bit deeper, and I will take some of this out and then go a bit deeper until I get to about the thickness I want. Okay? So again, I got to speed my lathe up here a bit. I'm going to go to around 1600 RPM. Again, speed is your friend at this point. Look, the piece is locked in place in the back here, so you've got the tailstock on the front here, and you've got a lot of air that you're turning. So you're better to turn fast than slow. If you turn slow, each pause between that air, and if your gouge moves in a bit, it just gives you so much more chance of having a catastrophe, where bad words will be spoken, as Mr. Grumbine says. So, anyways, you want to turn this at a fairly high rate of speed. That's 1600 RPM. That's pretty good. And again, you want to do a light touch here. You're not trying to hog off any material here. You're just trying to do a light touch. Very important. See, once you get inside that ring, you've got support all the way around. You can hear the difference in the cut between there and... because outside that ring, I'm cutting a lot of air. So, you want to leave this part here in the middle as thick as you can leave it for as long as you can, because it provides a lot of support for the piece. So, now I'm watching from up top here. The important thing that I want to do is I want to line up this curve and this curve. As you can see right now, this curve is it's curved and it's still quite flat here. So that means I got to change it so that these two curves are the same. Sometimes you got to come in here and remove a little bit of wood so you have some space to work. And stop as often as you want. Take a look. It's still not deep enough. My curve is still not good there. You see this size is different than that size. So I got to cut in some more. That's probably getting closer. Let's take a look. Yeah, even it still needs a little more in here, off, but we're getting closer to the curve being the same. Again, I'm going to remove a little bit of material here because it's kind of in the way, and also change my position on my tool rest here just a bit so I can have a little more support on the tool. Again, remove a little material. Now, we're getting down to a critical point here. The curves here aren't quite matched up, but I'll fix that in just a second. I don't want to go much thinner than that. This walnut is pretty soft, and in my experience it will break fairly easy. So half of that would be really as far as I'd want to go. I don't really want to go much further than that. So I don't have much to remove here. The cut here is not bad. It's looking pretty good. Of course, you can fix a lot of that with sandpaper. Much as some guys won't like to say it, but that's the truth, you can. So I'm going to just get this down that last little bit. Take some of this out of here. Need a little bit of room to work here, so I need to move some of that. See, that's still too flat. I got to change that. Those two surfaces have to be, those two curves have to be the same. And I had to remove the material because if you don't remove the material, when I get into here, the gouge runs in, and of course that's going to be not a fun day. Still a little bit fat here compared to out there. That's thinner and that's fatter, so I got to still remove more out of the center, but I still have a little bit of room to go on the outside edge here. Take a look at that. It's looking pretty good. A little bit more on the center part there if I can. I'm starting here about edge of that's going to look pretty good. I think that's pretty well even, fairly even. Not bad. I could go a bit thinner. I'm going to. Now I'm really getting into the point of no return here. There's a certain point here where you really can't. Probably knock one of my corners off here. I'm going to just stop the lathe and move my tool rest like every book and every sensible person tells you to do. I really would like some support here because I'm going to cut right there, and as you can see there's not much there, and that's, even with all that mass still there, that's pretty wiggly. So super light touch. The tool has to be sharp, and you have to be really well, I think that's pretty good. I think we're gonna go with that. Now, the next important step is I'm gonna just remove a bunch of some material here. There's a real danger right now. A lot of guys get to this point, myself included, and you think, well, I got to remove all this material, and you just start hogging it off. Well, this is all pretty thin here, and if you have a little bit of an aggressive cut, you can shatter the whole bowl. There's not much material there. It's a pretty thin setup. So you got to be a bit careful, okay? So just remove it. Just go gently. And when you go towards the center there, it will sometimes just kind of break off. So you got to be careful you don't kind of jam your tool into the when you get near here, that last little 1/4 inch can just break off, and if you're not ready for it, you can just bash your tool right into there, which isn't good for your tool, and it's not good for the threads on your live center. So see how that just disappeared? You got to be ready for that. I mean, you could turn, at that point you could turn the tool over and do that if you like. Now, as probably you can see here, this is all getting pretty thin and pretty wobbly. So at this point, if you went out back here again, this would move so much that you would have a horrible chatter marks and it would look really awful. So I've got this edge here. Looks pretty good. A little bit thin on this corner, but I can show you in a minute. I'll show you with a little trick how you can fix that. But it's okay. It's not bad. So what you want to do now is you want to think, okay, you want to take a look here from the top, and you want to say, okay, here's the bottom of the bowl, and here's the inside of the bowl, and you would like it to be about the same thickness all the way to the bottom of the bowl. But if you go too deep, of course, then you can pop through the foot and make a very flat square funnel, which I've done, and I'm sure that you will do too as you try doing these. But you want to try to avoid that. So I'm going to take a little more off the inside here, and then I'm going to move this and take that nubbin out in the center. Again, light cut. You can hear the wood is screaming a bit because it's getting thin. There's going to be some chatter marks there, but they will come out with the sanding. Now I'm taking a look-see here. See, there's some chatter marks there because this is getting so thin. But they will come out with sanding. Those chatter marks are at the end of the world. So it's a little bit fat in the center there. I'm going to turn the gouge over, and I'm going to use the face and do a pull cut, which will get rid of a fair bit of that chatter marks. Again, I don't really want to go out past that circle, because that's where you get a lot of the chatter. That got rid of most of the chatter marks. It's still a bit fat in the center though. But I'm not going to probably get rid of that unless I get rid of that nubbin in the middle there. So I'm going to take as much of the nubbin off here as I can. And then I'm going to pull this out of here. Turn this off. Now please remember at this point, there's not much holding that. There's a piece of a little bit soft plastic holding a very small foot on the back there. So unless you want to send this across the room, you would like to do some very fine, very nice, very gentle cuts here. Make sure you're not going to catch a corner, and do some gentle cuts. If you push this way, even though that's a small nubbin, you can still pop the thing out of its holder. So I like to turn the gouge over and just go down, because I'm pushing into the headstock. I'm actually pushing into the chuck. So, sort of like the live center was pushing. So I have much less of a chance of popping this thing out sideways. If you went like this, you could very easily lever it right out and it would go flying around the room and bad words would be said. Nice little gentle cuts. You got all the time in the world here. You spent all this time up until this point making this, so there's no need to rush right now. There's no need to try to get it all done there. That popped off for me. So now, as I look at this, I can see that this is quite a bit fatter in the center than it is in the edges here. Well, quite a bit. Okay, it might be 3 millimeters here, and it might be 5 there. But I would like to change that. So I'm going to very carefully and very gently take out I'm just doing a shaping cut there with the tool flat. It's not the prettiest cut, but it's going to give me the shape that I want. I want a little bit more out of there. I've got to lower that tool rest just a little bit. Now I'm going to turn it in so I got some support near the center, but I'm still missing my corners here. Okay. Now I have a bit of a dip here and there's a bit of a bump here, so I got to lower that tool rest just a bit because I want to do a draw cut. Use the long edge of the gouge again, and I'm going to just take a little bit out of that center part there. That is looking not bad at all. A bit of a flat spot in the center there. I'm getting fussy here, I really shouldn't, because this is just a demonstration. You can see there's chatter marks there. That's because out here this is just moving like crazy. You can see it. I can just wiggle it with my hand with ease. Now, I'm pretty happy with that. Yep, I'm pretty happy with that. So, at this point, of course, again, you can grab your 120 grit sandpaper. Throw it on the floor first, of course. And then, really important when you're doing this, put your thumb and your finger here to hold these wings, because just the pressure from sanding it, you can break these things off. I know, I've done it. So a little bit of sanding, and again, you're sanding with the grain, because the circular sanding, you kind of sand across everything. But with you sanding like this, you're sanding with the grain, And see, you got a little bit more here in this corner here. This wing here, let's call it. Get rid of those chatter marks. They come out pretty easy, like I said. I think you get the idea. Now, a couple little tricks of the trade here. Sometimes, when you get to this point, you'll look and you'll say, oh snap, this is thin, this is a bit fat. Oh, it doesn't look so great. How can you fix that? Well, one of the ways you can fix that is you get yourself a small block of wood with a piece of sandpaper on it. And what you do is, with the headstock locked on your lathe so that it's not moving anywhere, see where it's a bit thick there? Just take this on an angle and you sand it just a little more. Just in the center there, give it a couple of strokes of the sander. And voila! Now it's all the same width across there. Unfortunately, it looks like my top camera has died. The battery has died on it. So of course you got to do all four sides. So now it's about the same. Now the curve is matched. And you won't really see it on the bottom side. Number one, not too many people look at the bottom. The only people look at the bottoms of bowls or other wood turners. The people you give them to as gifts, they might look at the bottom of the bowl once and then they never look at it again. You know, they look at the bottom to see if you put your name on it or whatever. Now see here, I've got a little bit of tear out. Can't see it on the top camera, I guess. So hang on, let's see if I turn that thing on again. Oh, looks like it's working now. Okay, you can see here on this how I've got a little bit of tear out. Well, if you take the sander, the sanding block, or you can take a block plane, a woodworking block plane, and you can just give this a bit sanding to kind of lower this edge a bit. Doesn't take very much. And then a little bit of sanding on the edge like that. Because nobody else is going to ever look at it and look at it. Well, I mean, another wood turner will. But you can tell them to slag off. But anybody that is enjoying this as a gift, or somebody who wants to have it for themselves, who hasn't watched this video, they're not going to see that. So you see now that the tear out is basically gone there. And of course, you know, it's better to have no tear out at all, of course. But part of doing this any kind of wood turning or woodworking for that matter is, you know, there's going to be, it's handmade, it's bespoke. So there's going to be spots, there's going to be things on it that aren't perfect, that need a little bit of massage, that need a little bit of a deft hand to kind of hide your mistakes, to hide your humanness, let's put it that way. So you see now I've got that curve there, is almost exactly identical. It's pretty close, didn't take very much off there. I bet you I took less than a 32nd of an inch off there. So that's basically it. Now, of course, if I was making this to, you know, to do something more than a demo, I would go through my 3 levels of sanding and I would do the whole 9 yards. I would also probably put finish on it right here. Depends what you're giving these for. I give these a lot to people to use with food. And there's 2 kinds of finishes I'll put on it. One is I'll just put a basic wax finish on it, either the turner's wax, which is good. The only problem is if they ever put anything hot on it, it melts the wax. Or I just put a mineral oil coating on them. And the heavy mineral oil, which is sold as a laxative in North America, you can buy the butcher block stuff at the hardware store. It costs like, you know, 15 bucks for a half pint. Or you can buy the laxative, which is like $1.50 for a half pint. It's essentially exactly the same thing. And you just rub it on, it soaks in, it protects the wood, it's a totally food safe, I mean it's a laxative, so I mean you're not like drinking it, you're just a little bit on the surface, so it's not going to hurt you, but it gives you a nice finish that soaks in and does a good job of protecting the wood, but it also leaves the wood very natural looking. And so people can use these plates. I find a lot of people like using them as side dishes. They put pickles on them, or you know, something, you know, small, I don't know, little finger food kind of things or stuff like that. So now you see, as I take this out of here, the edge here, because it came out of this nice sort of soft plastic, is fine. The edge is in good condition. So this, with just a little bit more hand sanding, just going to clean up that edge there a little bit. Clean up the edge there, and then, like I say, normally I would have gone through my whole thing. The other thing I often do on these is on the bottom, I'll put a dot in the center, and then I'll cut 2 or 3 rings, just to kind of give you. I like the idea of when you pick the plate up and you turn it over, and oh, there's a little surprise there. That's kind of something that I like. I can see this needs a little more sanding. There's a little bit of a bump there. I don't know if that shows up in the video or not, but I can see it. And with a little bit of hand sanding like this, just a couple of minutes, especially on something fairly soft like this walnut, that little bump just disappears. It's gone, and you don't have to worry about it. Anyways, these are fun little bowls. You can play around with them. You can really make this curve extreme. I've even seen where they do the curve up and then go back down, and so you kind of form like a lip. Those are a lot of work, and I've done them, and they're kind of neat to do. But most people kind of look at it and sort of go, "Oh, interesting, huh?" Like most people really like this shape. They like this form. And the interesting thing you can do about this is, for example, you could get yourself 4 or 5 pieces of the same species of wood, and then you could start with like a 5-inch, a 4-inch, a 3-inch, a 2-inch, and you could make a set of 4 or 5 that step down by an inch or half an inch or whatever you decide in size, and then you can, when you have it sitting somewhere in presentation, it can sit with all of them on top of each other and kind of look like the you know, the tiered tower that we see here in Japan or elsewhere in Asia, I guess, like, you know, the one down in Kyoto, that famous 7-towered pagonia or whatever they call it. So that's basically it. I hope that wasn't too long. And I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, please shoot me a remark or comment in the below part of the video here, and I'll try to answer it. These are fun. They're quick. Once you're set up for it, you know, once you have this, and once you know how to do it, and what I do is when I make these, I often sit down and I make, you know, quite a few of them. So like right now I've got a whole bunch sitting here ready to go. I get my table saw out, and I got some scrap wood, and I cut up a whole bunch of pieces. I drill a recess in a whole bunch of them, and I just go and I make 10 or 15 at one time. And because when you kind of get into the rhythm of it, and you kind of get used to hanging that tool over the edge and cutting some air and cutting some wood at the same time, it just all seems to come together nicely, and it does a good job. And they're lots of fun, like I said, to turn, or at least I think they're fun to turn. And they're quick. I can do one in less than half an hour. As I'm yabbering away to you guys here and chatting about this and that, it takes longer. But when you're just got the tunes cranked in the background and you crank up the lathe, you can turn one of these in half an hour. There's no reason you can't turn them in half an hour. If you want to do the mineral oil coat finish on it, the finishing is dead easy. If you wanted to, of course, you could lacquer them, you could spray lacquer them or something, which would give you a very durable finish. But for food, my personal opinion is the mineral oil coating on them is very nice, very easy, very good finish. That's you can also just refresh it easily. Give the person, when you give them a set of them, you just tell them to get some of that oil, or just give them a small vial of it, and every now and then they can just rub some on with a paper towel, and it looks like brand new. And I really like these. They're fun, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate it.